Off to do exams today. A-levels, AS, GCSEs all getting underway, not to mention the dreaded SATs for 10 and 11-year-olds and even 6 to 7-year-olds. Well,
the saga of sitting exams has been a crucial part of the education process since time immemorial, but are exams really the best way to test intelligence? I would say if you're good at them, yes. If you're not good at them, you'll say no. Joining us today, inclusion consultant Kirsty Nicole Hadley. What is an inclusion consultant? What's that?
We try and fight for a more inclusive sort of society, so for rights for lots of neurodivergent kids and kids with different educational needs and also in the workplace.
Gotcha, OK. And very much in the workplace, a woman that knows what it takes to get ahead in the workplace. Dawn Neeson, former newspaper editor and now social commentator who argues time, tests instill discipline and a spirit. What sort of spirit within you do you think, the discipline?
The determination, and I think, I think most sensible people will see both sides of this argument, but however, we are going to disagree for the purpose of debate. Exams are... They're really tough things to do. I still have nightmares about doing my A-levels, and that's like 40 years ago. But I do think for the majority of children, they are a very good way of preparing for what faces you in real life. Real life isn't always easy. You are going to face challenges. You are going to feel pressured. You are going to face anxiety. And I think the discipline of studying for and researching for exams is a very, very useful tool to get you through life. There is also the disappointment. You learn to cope with disappointment because most people fail exams. It is what happens. But also the sense of achievement when you do quite well. Now, I know that...
I suspect you did quite well, which
no,
is why
I did. Look, Eamonn, I actually... the anxiety of... Maths is not my strong point. Some people say lots of things aren't my strong point. But maths is not my strong point. And I was so anxious about doing my maths O-level when it was O-levels for GCSEs. I actually passed out halfway through the exam.
Oh,
I literally fainted through the exam. Well, I still passed.
You might relate then to what Ben Fogle, National Treasurer, has said in a letter to the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, and I just want to read you a little excerpt from it. It says, education should not be a competition. Exams bring stress and anxiety to a generation of kids who should be full of hope and excitement about their education. It should enthuse, empower, embolden and fill our youngsters with the wonder of learning, not the trauma of exams. I failed my exams, but exams failed me. Exams crush the spirit of us who are exam lexic.
Interesting.
If you agree with him.
Exam lexic, and exams failed him, he was saying.
Well, I think that... what I think is one thing, actually, but I asked my child, my 11-year-old child, what they thought about exams and whether or not we should abolish tests and exams. And they said that, yes, which is probably no surprise because most 11-year-olds would say that. But they backed that up by saying that kids who don't do well in tests and exams would then have access to better jobs and more equal opportunities because their grades would be assessed overall rather than having to sit down and go through the stress and anxiety of a test that they find really difficult. Because I think that in a lot of these cases, we are, in fact, just teaching children how to pass tests.
But how else do you assess how a child, A, has got on with the curriculum, what they understand of it, and B, what their actual ability, mental ability is? Because if you take away exams, you're left with coursework, right? Well, we've got AI now. We all know that ChatGPT means that you can completely cheat everything. So how else do you do it? If you take away all the tech, sit them down, that's the most raw version of someone's intellect.
I think that's such an important point, and there's a very recent study showing that exams are actually more important than ever because the ChatGPT, which I have no pretense at understanding how it works, but they can literally write essays, they can literally get newspapers out these days, but they can write essays for you. So in New York and where else was it? New York and Japan, schools and universities are saying that coursework now almost has to be done under exam conditions because it's the only way that children will be themselves rather than using on a ChatGPT to do the essay for them.
I can see the sense in that. Dawn, I remember, by and large, I had surprisingly been from a non-academic household. I had a surprisingly pleasant time at school, primary school and grammar school. But I remember when life changed for me, which was when I was 10, and I had to sit the 11 plus, and in the days before tutors and all that sort of thing. But that really did. It became serious. And then you talk about the dreams that you have to this day. I still have dreams about certain homeworks when I was at grammar school and whatever. And that is a long time ago for me. So that is the, inverted commas, trauma that it puts on you. But I do remember that also, Nikki, I would say that people whose lives literally changed. I was in a class of 44 at primary school. 8 of us passed the 11 plus. And the lives of those 8 were completely different than the lives of the rest of the kids in that class. I mean, in terms of career and what they went on to do.
Well, first of all, did you just call me Nikki?
Sorry?
Kirsty.
Oh, Kirsty, sorry.
It's an occurring theme. I think that, like, on a very basic level, when we find ourselves in a situation that teachers, children and their families are all in agreement, mostly, that this system is traumatising our children, it's time for us to get our heads together and find a new way of doing things. Because when do the teachers, the children and the parents all agree on something? And really everybody is in agreement about this. The current examination and testing system is traumatising our children.
Ben Fogel makes a really interesting point. He says the exams have been produced by a lazy education department that doesn't seem to care about the welfare of our children. We're all unique. We should celebrate our individuality rather than trying to force us all to be the same.
He's right, that costs money.
But yeah, I mean, and it goes back very well to Kirsty's point. I mean, everybody comes up with criticisms of every system we have at the moment, from the NHS to politics to exams, but no one comes up with answers.
Yeah.
What is the answer to this? I mean, I can understand where Ben's coming from. I completely understand where Kirsty's coming from. But what I don't know is what the answer is with, as we've just discussed, with ChatGPT and machines doing everything for us. How do we know how well a child is actually doing if we don't examine them?
We are all guilty of this. TV companies, and it comes exam day, and we'll do it again this year. We do it every year. I'm not a fan of it in the slightest, but you go to some school where little junior will open their envelope as to what their exams will be. I've never, ever in 42 years of presenting breakfast television seen anybody who's failed or not done well in their exams on those mornings. So not only do they do well, but they're a star all the time, whatever. And I don't know what sort of message that sends out, because there's got to be a lot of kids who are sitting in, well, that's not me. That didn't happen to me.
Yeah, and they don't see themselves represented there. And I think that then adds to this sort of feeling of feeling broken or faulty in some way. And I mean, if we look at the statistics, there's currently almost 2 million children that are out of full-time education. And these aren't children that don't want to go to school. These are the children that can't go to school because of the way the education system is set up and the way that they're tested. And it's estimated that those children, the amount of children that aren't in school with ADHD have received over 20,000 corrective or negative messages about themselves by the age of 10. And it's like, what's that doing to their self-esteem, you know? They deserve better.
Well, I would always make the point that some of the cleverest people I know, some of the most bookish people I know, haven't necessarily gone on to have the most successful of careers. And it might feel like the end of the world if you don't get into Oxford and Cambridge or whatever at 18, but actually, those people I know that went to Oxford and Cambridge didn't necessarily have some of the best careers. And you point to a lot of the big people in industry. I think it's, Richard Branson failed his GCSEs. Jon Snow famously flunked his exams. Many of these people are incredible entrepreneurs.
See, the difference I had is I wanted a career, I wanted a job, and I knew what that job was going to be. And exams set me up for that, and I didn't want to go to Oxford or Cambridge. I couldn't have got into Oxford and Cambridge anyway, but it was absolutely no ambition for me, nor do I see how it would have been an advantage to me in the career that I chose. But I do think, Dawn, that the thing that helped me most through school was sport, and the idea of being competitive, and the idea sport did more for me than anything else. And maybe I see a bit of that in exams. I did never learn to lose, Isabel.
He was always a winner, Isabel. Come on.
I think that's one of the benefits of sport. Is that you understand that
never,
you don't
never
always
learn
win.
to lose. No,
Never accept
it becomes
losing.
a habit.
Absolutely.
So what does sport teach you then? Discipline.
To win,
right?
To be competitive.
To be competitive and disciplined. I mean, we come from the same background. We're similar, not quite as old, but similar age group. So I completely understand that. And I think the one thing I would like to come back to the Oxbridge thing. I didn't go to university. Quite obviously, I didn't go to university. But I do think one emphasis we place too much on exams in is that every child has to go to university. Every child has to have a degree, or they are a failure. And I think Suella Braverman's speech today about training people to do jobs like lorry drivers. My dad was a lorry driver. I'm incredibly proud of what he did.
Yeah.
That we shouldn't demean these jobs. You know, we shouldn't demean the traditional working class sort of like slightly sneered upon jobs these days.
Demeaning it though.
No, I'm saying she's not demeaning it. She's actually saying that these jobs should be well paid. We should respect what everybody does for a living, for God's sakes. It doesn't matter whether you've got a degree or not. So I think there is an argument here that with the exam situation, the fact that, you know, so much is put on university degrees is completely wrong, and we should encourage children at that age to be able to go, and, whether it's sport, Eamonn, or apprenticeship or anything.
Kids need literacy, and they need, you know, basic mathematics,
basic education,
figures, whatever it is. They don't need exams by and large, but they do need skills, whether it be a carpenter, whether it be a motor mechanic, whatever. We can stand back and say, wow, they do that really well, because I couldn't do that.
Yeah, and I think it's like asking ourselves the question, do we want to instill a passion for learning during our kids' formative years, or do we want them to be taught that learning is a thing to dread and be stressed about and dislike?
Learning is the most beautiful thing.
It should be an adventure, right? It should be a really beautiful journey of exploration and discovery.
I was lucky I had teachers that taught me the value of that from a primary school level.
Very lucky.
We could talk about this all day, but we've got to stop it there. Kirsty, Nicole,